This is the historic Cherokee Trail. Cherokee and white immigrants together blazed the trail during the 1849 California Gold Rush. They traveled from Oklahoma into Kansas along the Santa Fe Trail to Bent's Fort in Colorado, where they followed a trapper's trail across Colorado's Front Range into Wyoming. There they joined the California Trail at Fort Bridger. These stories will give you a glimpse into immigrant life, their journeys, trials and tribulations, why they sought out a new life and new riches traveling through Colorado. Join us as you see history unfold. Hi, my name is Ethan Gannett. I'm a member of the Oregon-California Trails Association, Colorado Cherokee Trail Chapter, where I serve as the mapping chair. As a field team member, my work is to investigate, identify, and document immigrant trail routes to preserve and understand their history. And sometimes in doing so, we encounter a mystery through historical sleuthing. We reveal new and unexpected storylines. Today we're standing at Roberts Ranch Preservation Trust, where we have one of those mysteries to talk about. Now, Roberts Ranch is a working cattle ranch whose original owners had a deep appreciation for the Western history of these grounds. As such, they put in place a dedicated trust to preserve the ranch and the stories it tells. But before we get to the mystery, let me tell you how I got involved with OCTA. I love the outdoors, hiking, and seeing new places and exploring historic trails. So when a friend of mine asked me to join OCTA, I decided to become involved in the mapping and the marking of the Cherokee Trail. Little did I know how much I would also enjoy the sleuthing of historical mysteries as part of that effort. Now, let me tell you about the mystery of Dutch George Cabin. Our mapping group became involved in a project to determine the route of the Cherokee Trail through this ranch. Our history research of old maps, surveys, satellite imagery, and journals identified multiple parallel trails through here. Our ground proofing corroborated those trails and even found more. Now, it is not uncommon to find a corridor of trails heading through an area due to ground and weather conditions at the time of travel. What was uncommon, though, is we discovered several trail spurs oddly diverting up the slick rock behind me. Now, why is that? Let me explain by showing you a couple maps. Some of the original historic research of the trail by a fellow named Martin Schlew had these various trail spurs all heading in a northwest direction and converging to one trail at the north. But when we actually located the trails in the field, we found that the three southernmost trail spurs converged at this slick rock area above me instead. We wanted to understand the reason why these trails converged here. Well, you may note there's an old dilapidated barn behind me, and we pondered whether there once was a cabin here that perhaps attracted the immigrants to come this way. I'm standing next to an old rustic cabin here on the ranch. This cabin was moved here by the Roberts family in the late 1800s, but nobody has been able to verify its original location or original inhabitants and if it played a role in some Western immigration. Local lore has it that a couple of locals perhaps lived here, nicknamed Dutch George and French Pete, around the time of the Western immigration. Now, History Colorado placed a sign here in the 1980s which says the cabin has been at the Roberts Ranch for over 100 years. And the historic designation paperwork indicates it was built in 1859 or 60, and that the cabin was indeed moved from a meadow nearby and inhabited by French Pete and Dutch George. The cabin is remarkable because these are the original logs it was built from. And we know that because in 2019, the U.S. Forest Service conducted a dendrochronology test which established the age of the logs. From these test results, we know the earliest logs of the cabin date back to 1867, which was the time the Cherokee Trail was still in use here. That supports our theory. So part of our oral history or legend is that French Pete and Dutch George both lived in this cabin and it was built in 1859 or 60. Well, sorry, French Pete died in 1866. So with our test results placed in the first year of construction in 1867 or thereafter, it's pretty clear we can dismiss French Pete as ever living in this cabin, and that the cabin couldn't have been built any earlier than 1867. Therefore, this cabin could only possibly have been inhabited by Dutch George, who was alive and known to be in the area at that time. This time frame still overlaps with the use of the Cherokee Trail by Western immigrants. Do you see how our sleuthing has already corrected the historic record? But all historic documentation agrees this cabin was not originally built in this location, that it was moved here in the late 1800s. So that brings us back here to the Slick Rock, where the trail spurs converged. Could it be that the cabin was originally here in the 1860s and 70s? As part of our investigation, we talked to Dale Roberts and ranch manager Zach Thode, who had a good understanding of the history of the ranch. Both men believe that the cabin could have been located here at the Slick Rock, near the old barn ruins. Our historic research also reinforced that the cabin likely was in this location. Now, there are many tools in the field that we use, but I wanted to introduce you to one of the most helpful devices in this mystery, the trusty metal detector. We asked ourselves, could we find evidence of a structure once being near the barn and the pond? We detected the nearby hillside, nothing. Then we detected the Slick Rock and an interesting finding emerged. Period square nails. And when mapped out, they were in a rectangular pattern, as if they fell around the foundation of a building. The rectangular pattern was 14 by 16 feet. Guess what? The cabin foundation itself measured 15 by 15 feet. Pretty close match for 155 years of nail scattering, don't you think? And the nails from the Slick Rock matched the nails from the barn posts, and most importantly, matched the nails on the side of the cabin. By carefully researching, examining old maps, and doing field work, we discovered patterns and evidence that likely explains where the Dutch George cabin originally stood. Did we definitively prove the cabin's location, inhabitants, and relevance to these trail spurs? Well, as in all things historical, without having a first-hand account, we can say that what is more probable than not, that Dutch George could have lived in this cabin, that the cabin probably was built at the Slick Rock location in the late 1860s, and that it was ultimately relocated to its current resting spot. By piecing together these clues, we've helped the Preservation Trust to better understand the history of the ranch and provided historical knowledge that is more accurate to what may have happened here 155 years ago. The cabin being here may have also influenced some of the latter-day Cherokee trail spurs to come by this area, perhaps to trade with Dutch George for some furs or locally grown vegetables. And so now you know the mystery of Dutch George cabin. But it's only a mystery until you get out in the field and sleuth the clues. I became involved in OCTA to help satisfy my curiosity of local history. If you also enjoy solving historical mysteries, get out and discover your trail, and hey, discover yourself. Check out the Oregon California Trails Association at octa-trails.org.